This video is a film study examination of Rashod Bateman's 2024 season one that we know produced 9 touchdowns on only 45 catches. Really going to try to delve into the dynamic of how Lamar Jackson and Rashod Bateman help each other, why things were so explosive for both of those guys, but for Bateman in particular in 2024. Some of the reasons, maybe the specific elements of how they help each other. And I'm also going to give some sports analogies or comparisons. The first of which is a little bit outside the box for me. I usually do basketball, combat sports comparisons. In this case, I'm going to talk about Rashod Bateman as a striker in soccer. So a guy with very little touches, but he converts at a high percentage. So someone who gets the ball, actually touches the ball, 4, 5, 6 times a game, but scores twice. And that analogy kind of breaks down a little bit because he doesn't get only deep shots, even though he produced tremendous yards per catch and yards per target. Those two numbers, the latter number, in fact, was insane. He almost 17 yards per catch in 2024, but over 10.5 yards per target. That was seventh in the NFL, behind really, only guys like Jamison Williams, Jaden Reed, AJ Brown, and then a couple of other low volume wide receivers, if you will, and Christian Watson and Alec Pierce. The outlier among that group, the top seven, is George Kittle, second in the league in yards per target, a tight end with the 49ers. So I think one point of comparison to talk about for Bateman, the 10.5 yards per target. Look, he had only averaged 11.5 yards per catch the season before in 2023 when he split time essentially with OBJ for large periods of the season. Anyway, there's a huge differential there. That could be a hint, if you ask me, as to what's to come in this offense. When there's so many weapons on the field, a guy like Bateman, when he does get a target, I like our chances. I like his chances to be able to produce a big play from that. And the interesting thing from that standpoint is his routes are not gimmies all the times. They're not things that he's not getting a ton of pick or rub concepts to allow him to get open. It's not that he never lines up to the field, but oftentimes he's to the boundary. He's got to set up and win on his own. He had a 63% catch percentage last year, 2024, best in his career. Ravens and him agreed on a contract extension last week, sets them up for 2025 at least with a ridiculous amount of weapons at the wide receiver position, Flowers, Bateman, and Hopkins. And then you have two guys waiting to get on the field, waiting in the wings, in Tylan Wallace and Devontae Walker, that have their own unique capabilities as well. Let's get to some of the film that just illustrates how explosive Bateman was in 2024 throughout the whole season, but we're going to kind of backtrack here or start at the end, if you will. He had 5 touchdowns in the first 14 weeks of the season. Really finished on a high note, if you ask me. Kind of like this dash concept here against the Giants on the road in Week 15. You're getting a funnel release from Bateman and Zay Flowers up at the top side of the screen, and then the running back Justice Hill is crossing Lamar Jackson's face to go to the opposite side and really kind of hold or manage the edge defender with a tight end, and then possibly the running back helping out depending on what occurs with that tight end from the initial block. So as it stands with Bateman, him and Flowers are on this funnel release. One of the few times, I don't want to say few times, but one of the situations where he's lined up to the field, which was not the majority of instances where you saw a big play produced. Generally, you saw him lined up down here to the boundary, and I do wonder what the impact of a DeAndre Hopkins being there this year is going to be. Meaning, is Bateman going to get more opportunities like this one, where he's part of the read, part of the play design, and not just a backside element that has really got to win things on his own, create space through manipulation of leverage and depth of the defensive back that he's matched up against. Got a real hint as to the spring and explosiveness that he was going to provide in Week 1 against the Chiefs. Especially his releases, his first 2 or 3 steps off the line. It was pretty clear that he was healthy and looking like the guy that we saw for a very brief period of time early in 2022. You may recall the long touchdown against the Dolphins on like a slant / RPO, and then some impressive plays the following week against the Patriots near the sideline, from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. That's the difference with Bateman compared to some of the other guys on the roster, even Zay Flowers, is that Bateman specializes in doing great work from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. Now the Ravens clearly have two such players with the addition of Hopkins, like I alluded to earlier. Some film from week one against the Chiefs. Again, lined up into the boundary. Lamar Jackson happens to be under center here. So a little bit of a play action concept. Henry's trying to get onto the flats. Doesn't really get great depth in terms of his route. Andrews also kind of like a short or underneath over concept. And Bateman, really the snappiness here to pull this route down, get to the top of it, hit the brakes, and leave the defensive back such that Lamar fits this through a window. Clean play that really illustrated how he was able to get off the line, threaten vertically, and then sit routes down in the 12 to 18-yard range and make himself available for Lamar. One thing from the film and an element to the Bateman Lamar Jackson relationship or working relationship that we noticed in 2024 that was different is how much they helped each other. And what I mean by that is Bateman gets a lot of free releases, and that's dangerous for the defense. And part of that is a byproduct of the softer off coverages that teams often have to deploy against Lamar. That combination that is almost, symbiotic. They help each other. Lamar's mobility and the threat of Derrick Henry as a runner kind of necessitates corners being able to see the flow, whether the ball's handed off. And that's one little dynamic that's been true for years, don't get me wrong, is that we didn't see a ton of press man with only a four-man rush, the quintessential version of man free, because Lamar Jackson's always killed that version of man free. If you're only going to rush four and you're going to play man, once Lamar gets out of there, which he will, then all he's got usually is one guy to beat a linebacker or a safety dropping down to be the low hole dropper in the middle of the field. So the coverage umbrella that Lamar Jackson sees or that Rashod Bateman has to go against is a byproduct or related to the skills that Lamar Jackson has. And so the way that this goes in the other direction is I think Bateman is a real handful when he's got free releases. That dynamic, it creates more space for him off the line on the release. And that just makes him, way more effective. So from that standpoint, we can't blame Rashod Bateman at all for deciding, a week ago and then a year ago that he wanted to stay in Baltimore and continue to benefit from that dynamic. One more play from that Chiefs game. It's the catch in the fourth quarter up the right sideline. So here he is, and he does have a press man corner lined up in his face. There's the routes that's going to emanate from the three stand-ups for the Ravens or three receivers. The two safeties are kind of sandwiched together, which is quite unusual. And then they're breaking apart. They're going to drop back to a too-high safety look. Really, the Chiefs are caught here in what I would call a Tampa 2, with this guy acting as the Mike linebacker. So the two routes to the top side of the field are spreading or trying to split this safety, and then Bateman is working against a corner, and it's mirrored routes, by the way, with Bateman and Flowers up top. You can see them both hedging to the outside briefly, and then taking the route back up the sideline. Lamar escaping some pressure. I think Karlaftis had kind of got around Macari, and the timing of the catch was sick. We knew that Bateman had athleticism when he was drafted in Baltimore. We saw instances of it his rookie season. We saw some in 2022 that, especially against the Patriots, that week 3 game on the road, he looked incredibly fast with a great burst. And then a week or two later, or maybe even less than that, he was gone for that brief time period. So the point of showing you this one is that Bateman is able to come through in big moments and, again, does a ton of work from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline, especially on vertical routes. Same play from the end zone angle. Another thing I really enjoyed about watching him this year was he acted like he had been there before. So what I mean by that is when Bateman made big plays, he just got up and moved on to the next. A couple of times you saw him kind of throw the ball up in the air, celebrate, but it looked like he had supreme confidence in his ability and didn't need to celebrate one touchdown or one big play because he knew that he had the opportunity now and the ability to go make another. That play was really a hint or a harbinger of things to come in week 1. None of us probably would have guessed that he would score 9 touchdowns on 45 catches, so 1 out of every 5 receptions would go for a score. Additional to that, let me clarify something from a moment ago. It's not to say that, when there was press man or the threat of press man, Bateman wasn't effective. In fact, I thought he was able to win a large percentage of the time, particularly with our early season matchups in 2024. Teams like the Raiders, the Bengals, the Bills, and the Commanders just did not have corners that could match up with him. The convergence of things that occurred in 2024, Bateman being healthy, Lamar's second year in an offense with Todd Monken, and then the impact and gravity of Derrick Henry, it just set the table for Bateman to be able to make big plays. Next year, it could be Zay Flowers with a high percentage of touchdowns with a lower volume of catches. I think that I would like to see Bateman get more opportunities, flat out, more targets. But with so much talent on this team offensively, with the tight ends likely and Andrews as well, along with Henry, Hill, and Mitchell, really you can't go wrong no matter who gets the ball after the ball is snapped. A couple of examples of either the threat of press man or actual press man occurring and how Bateman was able to win, quite easily against the Raiders week 2 at home, second loss to begin the season against the AFC West opponent. Little play action to Henry and just an in-cut, clean win. We had seen Bateman do this stuff before against man coverage, like I had referenced earlier. The touchdown against the Dolphins, I think week 2 of 2022 is one that comes to mind. He's just a guy that is able to get off the line against press man, and he doesn't have to necessarily use his hands to do so. He's not a slugger from a release standpoint. He's more so a guy that's agile enough, fast enough, and then threatens the vertical enough such that the corner is unable to commit to being too physical in the first 2 to 3 yards of the route. Touchdown against the Cowboys here. He's lined up as the number 3 receiver to trips, so we've got a tight end backside. Ravens did that often, don't get me wrong, in 2024. I'd like to see it occur a little bit more, whether it's 12 personnel or 11 like this one. So the route is going to threaten the safety to the backside, the player who's spot shadowed in yellow. Bateman's going to bring his route in towards that safety and then snap back to the right hash. Lamar, kind of that semi-roll movement or reaction post snap to some pressure. Easy touchdown against the backside safety, who really didn't have a good option since Bateman had a two-way go. Also, Lamar and Bateman were just on the same page so often with their reads and adjusting to coverages. I think the instruction, the work, and practice time they obviously put in last year had an impact. Couple of examples here, albeit against teams like the Bills that show, very vanilla looks in certain areas of the field, at least in my opinion. Here's one attempt by the Bills to kind of give one look pre-snap and then roll to something else. I feel like Lamar had a great last season, 2024, excuse me. I feel like he had a great plan of how to identify coverages pre-snap. So whatever the indicators were that they had in particular games for stuff like this, where you've got a safety lined up close to the line of scrimmage, almost like a nickel defender, and then he's going to fly out of there to get to a Tampa 2, with Hamlin switching to be the Mike linebacker, essentially in that coverage. Well, Bateman up at the top side of the screen is just going to sit his down once he sees the safety in front of him. And Lamar has picked the correct guy, the overwhelming majority of the time to throw the football to in the last 2 years under Monken's scheme. But in this case, with respect to Bateman, he's getting these high percentage opportunities on deeper routes. I don't know what his average depth of target is. I don't really track those stats. I don't know what his average route depth was, and I really don't know how you would necessarily measure that. I guess the final destination of your route as the ball is thrown. But this is just a guy who's really smart in this offense. I think it's a really great fit to play with Lamar Jackson, but I also think it's an exceptional alignment of factors when he was able to get into a Todd Monken offense as opposed to playing for Greg Room. Another one here where you've got particular alignment pre-snap that's going to change or be altered. In this case, the Bengals are making it look like a possible stick split zero situation, and then Geno Stone going to fly out of there on the snap and get to center field. They're going to make this turn this into a cover 3. There's the 2 routes to this bottom side, and I just feel like Bateman is a guy who understands how to win against certain leverages. He also, to be honest with you, and I think highly of Cam Taylor-Britt, the corner for the Bengals. I think he's carved himself into a really nice NFL corner. However, This past year, and even in 2023, Bateman really got the better of him in a number of matchups. A really nice throw, really nice play, excuse me, completion against cover three. So you can see the way this works out. One of the safeties is going to sit, and then you've got droppers to get out to the four underneath coverage areas in a cover three. Your four underneath coverage guys, and your three deep. And then Bateman's going to bring this back to the sideline, make a diving catch. His ability to make catches last year that were, I don't want to say off target, but not necessarily directly in stride, I think was quite notable. For example, the first catch or the second play that I showed you against the Chiefs, the late fourth quarter catch where he's fully extended, diving, almost, if you will, leaping, I should say, in the air to make a stab of a ball that Lamar really put in a great place, but it wasn't exactly right in the middle of Bateman's body for him to make a high percentage catch. In essence, Bateman was in the right place, at the right time, pretty much all year. Him and Lamar had that connection whereby Lamar understood where Bateman was going to be, and no more better example in some cases than this play. This is a sticks blitz zero situation on third down. The Ravens, I think, week 5 win against the Bengals. So we'll track Bateman running across the field for a moment. Let you guys see how open he is. You do have a free rusher, Geno Stone. I broke this play down on my Patreon yesterday. I like to try to put out a little more content on my Patreon during the off season. It's difficult to do so during the regular season. So in any case, this particular video was about this play in isolation. So previously, the Ravens have had trouble with stick split zero prior to 2024. This backside drag really, I think, is impossible to defend unless one of these droppers here, someone dropping out, does a fantastic job of identifying the split, the width of the X receiver, in this case Bateman, which could possibly lead to this drag here. Essentially, he's lined up closer to the left tackle, he being Bateman, and he can get across the field on that route you see there. How does the stick split zero work? Why did it work? Well, it's a potential 7-man rush, but it rarely is because one or two of the interior guys is going to drop out. Well, how can I reliably say that? Because they're reading it. So let's use the left guard as an example. If you are a defensive player and you're lined up outside of that left guard on the stick split zero concept, you are reading that guard. So if the guard steps to you, like you see here, then you would step to him and then get out of there and get underneath. So basically, one or two guys are trying to block off this area of the field such that the quarterback doesn't have a quick release to get it to. Additional to that, if the quarterback immediately looks in this direction and someone runs, say, a shoot route or a flat, these defenders in stick split zero are generally looking right at the quarterback. Now you can see this safety here. I think Von Bell is actually not. But the point is they feel like from a schematic standpoint, they have everything covered for quick passes. And I would tend to agree. It actually works quite well in the NFL in a lot of instances. But stuff like this is going to be impossible to defend because these guys are occupied with routes that emanate from their side where they lined up. So the Ravens receivers, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Zay Flowers, all are running routes to that side, to the top side of our screen. And that occupies all three of the DBs. Bateman runs onto that open space. Even if CTB was to be running with Bateman, there's still going to be opportunity and space for Bateman to run onto this throw, make the catch, get the first down at minimum, and have an opportunity to try to squeeze into the end zone like he did anyway. So this was used by Bateman, I think, 4 times in 2024. A play that I think is designed to go to the backside drag. Now, there's also an opportunity on this play to get the ball to Zay Flowers, and if CTB runs with Bateman, then Mark Andrews is probably open on the over concept as well. Something that Bateman has done exceptionally well in the last 2 years in the Todd Monken scheme is win on in-breaking routes. Whether it's sticks, or whether it's a slant, a snag, just an in route or a dig, Bateman is a guy that's consistently available on those types of routes. It's not that he couldn't have won on those concepts before 2021, 2022. We just didn't see him used with the same propensity, number one, and we didn't see the same connection between him and Lamar on those concepts. He's just very adept, he being Bateman, at getting to the top of the numbers, near to the hash, unscathed with a clean release and that timing that him and Lamar have to allow him to possibly get yards after the catch showed up at least a dozen times in 2024. Let's show a couple of them here. He's up at the top side again, matched up with CTB on a 3rd and 4. Get this real classic Monken concept to the boundary where you've got 3 receivers to the field running some independent route scheme together, and you have a flat route by the running back, slant or a snag by the receiver. So really clearing up this area of the field because the running back is pulling this safety again, who I believe is Von Bell, into the flats with him, opening up Bateman for that slant. Clean win. He's a winner against man to man, if you ask me. I don't know what the quote metrics show as far as him being open against man, be it press man or off man. But just watching the film, he's a guy that I see as a winner against man, and some guys just are not. Another one against Washington here, where you have a corner lined up on the line of scrimmage, threatening with press and really plays no impact. So here's the combination that you get. I think it's Aguilar from the boundary, or from the weak side of the formation, I should say, on a little in cut against man. And then Bateman taking his route up the sideline. Again, putting his foot in the ground, very similar to the first route that I showed you against the Chiefs. Leaving the corner. And those guys had their way. When I say those guys, I mean Bateman and Flowers really had their way in that matchup against Washington. I think the Ravens, I don't want to say went a little conservative, but they could have went to that well more often, being as those two guys, if I recall, had 13 catches on 13 targets on the day. And now the crazy thing is as far as high efficiency numbers like that or game situations, the Ravens front office has added more talent in the form of Hopkins. It's truly filthy rich personnel on the offensive side in Baltimore. I think it was they had an incredible, borderline historic season in 2024, right? If the O line can somehow improve this year, I think Bateman's ready to add on to this because the Ravens will be in more low pressure situations such that Lamar is able to pick and choose who to go to. The efficiency level that they had, I think, is the entire offense had, I think, is related to the high yards per catch for Bateman, meaning we didn't have to go to him by necessity. And in fact, with more talent there, it's quite possible that he'll still only get the same number of targets. I still think that from a contractual standpoint, this is a bargain both in the short term and long term. And it's kind of amazing to be able to sit here and say that Bateman is a long term after signing a bargain after signing the long term contract that he did because there were so many health situations and injuries early in his career. He's a guy who knows how to find the right spot in the defense against zone in a somewhat unsettled situation like this one, where Rosengarten's kind of allowing some high side or top side pressure. Lamar Jackson has to step up, and Bateman makes himself available. I think he's also really good when Lamar extends the play and finds room, finds space, if you will, um, to scramble outside the pocket. And Bateman's exceptional, in my opinion, at finding spots on the field to get to, adjusting his route, breaking off his route, actually. This is a kind of interesting concept. The Bucks have a six-man front shown in terms of a blitz, both inside linebackers walking up. They get a free rusher. Everyone else is running short concepts. You've got two little stop routes, and then two guys just kind of sitting in the flats. Bateman running the vertical. I mean, really, really undisciplined reaction by the safety. I think that's Whitehead, who's normally a pretty good football player, but in this case gets checked up, and Lamar escapes because there's a free rusher once again off the right side. Can't control Lamar, who puts this thing. I like the pace that Lamar puts on it, meaning he recognizes that there's DBs in play. So there's a corner, I think it's Zion McCollum, in recovery mode. And then the safety, Whitehead, who initially dashed up, is now trying to recover, now trying to regain some depth and get back there. So Lamar can't float this, put too much of an arc on it. Those guys will be able to make a play. So he put it on a little bit more of a direct path. I do think Bateman ran out of gas a little bit here. It would have been great to see him take this one to the house. The thing that kind of becomes interesting when you go back and watch film like I have here for this video is how many good corners he has wins over. I like CTB, really gave him problems for the last 2 years. This game against the Bucks, wins against Zion McCollum, who's A, about as athletic as it gets, and B, I thought really made strides to becoming an extremely consistent corner in 2024 once Carlton Davis III left and opened up some opportunities for him. Having said all that about McCollum, this is a really exceptional win for Bateman that I think kind of stamps his highlights from 2024. Again, you got the safety kind of looking either A into the backfield or B trying to check out the trip side. Oftentimes, the backside safety to trips is responsible for 3 vertical. And in this case, you've got a pseudo bunch alignment by the Ravens. The only problem I have with stuff like this is when number 3 is a tight end and you're really not going to be threatened vertically by that guy, number one. And number two, you get these kind of space releases by these 3 players. Basically, neither one of them is going vertical such in a manner that they could threaten the safety. It could be handled by the second level of the defense. So as it stands, that leaves McCollum one-on-one with Bateman, who brings his route to the sideline a little bit and just leaves him. You can see that McCollum turns his head when Bateman starts hedging to the sideline. McCollum is thinking that the ball is thrown. And that's a really great adaptation by Bateman, making it look like he's going to run a deeper out and then turning it vertical, just leaving the guy in a straight foot race. My suspicion is that McCollum is probably a guy who could beat him just 40 times. But this one looks beautiful. The acceleration from here to get to there, let's break it up into stages. So stage 1 ends right about here. Stage 2, this acceleration that begins and kind of stops here when he's veering off to the sideline is when he really put the foot to the pedal and started to leave McCollum a little bit, even before McCollum had turned his head. That was a big play. It was a crazy game anyway. The Ravens won I think it was 41-30 or 41-31 actually, where both teams really had their way with the opposing team's defenses for large stretches of the game. The element that I kind of talked about there on the previous snap, the touchdown versus McCollum, of safeties or defensive players staring at the quarterback, was really something I thought that Lamar took advantage of to the boundary. You're going to get another example of it here, using that concept that the Ravens have really patented under Monken, which is the number 1 receiver, in this case Bateman, running a slant or some type of in cut, and then the running back running a shoot route or something out into the flats to the same side. Ends up being very, very safe, simple, quick way to get the ball out. In this case, Bateman is spot shadowed at the bottom. The running back is going to go out into the flats, the blue arrow there, and then Bateman on the slant, wide open over the middle. You got an inside linebacker, I think it's JOK, wearing the cap on his helmet, kind of staring at the quarterback, even though Lamar starts to look to this side immediately, just not opening his eyes, getting any kind of awareness of the route that's breaking there. As such, the window ends up being a little bit wider than maybe it could have been. I'm a little picky about inside linebacker pass drops because it's something that I spent a lot of time either A, studying, and B, trying to implement with younger kids. You can get them to do this stuff once they see the quarterback look and they know they're to the target side. But in any case, Bateman running onto that open space, whether it's man, whether it's zone, he's a killer on that route right there. The slant from the boundary. Historically been an X receiver's route, whether it's a big X receiver, a smaller, quicker one, or a medium, average to above average height size guy like a Rashod Bateman. We get a kind of unique 3-man rush here by the Broncos. Bateman is up there, almost stacked with Flowers to the left side of the offense, top side of our screen. Really ends up being a Tampa 2. By the Broncos. So they're going to drop out 2 defensive tackles to the hashes and then outside rushers in the form of an inside linebacker and a nickel defender to the top side of the screen. So it ends up being, like I said, a 3-man rush, 1, 2, 3 with a spy. And then what I would say looks like a real Tampa 2 to me with the Mike linebacker getting depth here, trying to match a vertical by either Flowers or Bateman. The only problem for the Broncos is it's really a space concept in a lot of ways. And Bateman is just kind of sitting this down with Andrews running a later option underneath. If someone was to expand to get to Bateman, which no one does here, then you've got a lot of options for this play. I would call it a boundary side play, even though the ball is in the middle of the field. Bateman sits this thing down real quick, underneath the safety, clean catch of the football, We did have the one fumble against the Raiders. Other than that, I thought his ball security was pretty damn good, especially for a guy who was oftentimes catching the ball with either a corner on his hip and trail man, or catching the ball and turning with a safety, possibly a corner outside leverage and zone. So catching the ball and securing it quickly and trying to get yards after the catch is a pretty high standard. And Rashod Bateman really lived up to it in 2024. He's a finisher, like I talked about in the lead-in, the long touchdown against the Bucks, the sick catch against the Chiefs late in the fourth quarter in Week 1. The matchup against CTB is one that, like I said, Bateman's won a lot of that in the last 2 years. But I think now the combination of Andrews, Bateman, Flowers, adding Hopkins to the mix, a true grown up veteran version of Isaiah Likely, it's changed the dynamic between the Ravens and the Bengals. I do think that, we'll continue to have problems maybe defensively matching up with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. They're just that good. Having said that, I think the dynamic, the favor, the dynamic is tilted in our favor because of our offensive talent and their lack of defensive talent, especially in coverage. So they have oftentimes doubled Mark Andrews in critical moments. And you're going to see actually an example of that here. Third down, Bateman at the bottom of the screen. And so he's going to run this kind of orange route that I have drawn up. He kind of brings it into the middle of the field and returns it back to the bottom left corner of our screen. But this is kind of historically what Lou Anarumo did at times to Mark Andrews on third downs. Basically remove him as an option for Lamar Jackson. So pay attention to whatever you wish. But for a moment, I want to call attention to this kind of bracketing double, if you will, that the Bengals were instituting against Andrews here. They've done that many times on third down. So if we can win this matchup consistently and have super high quality wide receiver play by Flowers and Hopkins, the Ravens really are going to present problems for a Bengals team that, does have some good young defensive talent at the cornerback position. DJ Turner, Dax Hill had his fifth-year option picked up after suffering an injury last year. The point is, against their best coverage corner guy in the last 2 years, Rashod Bateman has been able to do this and beat him to get open on intermediate, short, and deeper concepts. If you recall, we actually had some misses down the field where Bateman had a step on CTB in 2023. I do think it'll be interesting, that matchup between the Ravens and the Bengals, because they got a new defensive coordinator, Al Golden. He's a former Alabama guy from Notre Dame most recently. Probably not going to double Andrews as much in those critical situations. So that could open up Andrews, in those matchups against safeties or linebackers. I don't think their safeties or linebackers are guys that are going to be suited to covering Mark Andrews at all. And in fact, with the release of Pratt, if they're going to start Demetrius Knight as a boundary side inside linebacker, I think that is a huge opportunity for Andrews and Likely to take advantage of that matchup. Typically, their boundary side inside linebacker, Pratt, has been an excellent coverage guy with high-level awareness. As athletic and impressive as I think Knight is, I don't think he brings that same dynamic. In any case, it'll help them, the Bengals, if Dax Hill can return to full health and contribute. A player that I really liked coming out of college, and obviously one that has a Ravens connection, with his brother being Justice Hill. Saved possibly his most impressive play for last. This is the 45-yard bomb from Lamar against the Chargers. Plays through contact while running vertical. So you're talking about the snap began at the 40-yard line for Bateman. So he's run a long way while dealing with contact from about the 10-yard line in. Still tracks the football, doesn't get deterred by the contact. I think that's the part that's most impressive. This is a separate skill from the things that we've seen so far in the film that I'm showing you, meaning, the ability to get open, the ability to make some catches and then secure the football, whether it's man or zone. Accelerate against man coverage, the Zion McCollum play for a touchdown up the right sideline. This is a separate skill from all of those things. He's got to track the ball and deal with the contact, try to stay in bounds while doing so. I think he was concerned about staying in bounds. No, I think he knew or understood that he was going to most likely end up in bounds. But this is a fantastic catch. Way to finish off that game and really finish off an unbelievable season. I know he did have a touchdown in the final regular season of the game against the Steelers, but I thought this was a real capper, if you will, at least to the film that, as I was going to present it, because it was a great story that unfolded for Bateman in 2024. He was unable to have huge or consistent impact for at least a couple of years because of injuries. And now, with the most talented offense that the Ravens have ever had, from the standpoint of Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, and Keaton Mitchell, all dangerous quality running backs, in the case of Henry being a Hall of Famer. And the Ravens have an insane amount of targets at the wide receiver and tight end position. The depth and the ability of each player who gets out there on the field is unmatched, if you ask me, throughout Ravens history from a personnel standpoint, and not talking about the offensive line, but just the offensive position players. Bateman to be a guy that we don't need to get 80, 85 catches is a real plus. This one, the last combat or the last sports analogy, excuse me, that I'm going to make is not a combat sports analogy, nor a basketball one, nor soccer. He reminds me of in the NBA when you'll see this situation now, as it stands now, going into the 2025 season. Reminds me of in the NBA when you'll see a guy average 15, 17 points a game for 2 or 3 years because he's playing behind two other really great offensive talents. And then that third player who averaged in the teens moves on somewhere, or one of the top two guys moves on, and suddenly he's scoring 24, 25 points per game. Am I saying that in 2025, I think Bateman's going to go for 85 catches and 12 touchdowns? No, in fact, I don't. There's just too much talent, and there's not enough footballs to go around. We won't run that many plays. If things work out well, which the schedule is, demanding or difficult once again, if things work out well, the Ravens will be in the lead a lot and won't have to throw some of these passes that you've seen Rashod Bateman come down with the ball like that last one against the Chargers. I think we're in line for a great season offensively, so long as the offensive line holds up and hopefully improves. But I'm not sure that it necessarily can, because we didn't really make any upgrades at guard, in my opinion. But who knows? Things could work out far better than my opinion right now. In any case, I'm looking forward to seeing how Bateman stacks another year on top of his 2024 season, which statistically was quite unbelievable for him to be averaging more yards per target than his previous career high for yards per catch. In any case, you guys let me know what you think of the video in the comment section, number one. Number two, if you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this film study look, albeit a quite lengthy one, of Rashod Bateman's 2024 season, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.